10 most unusual transport cemeteries. How are old types of transport seen off? Cars, boats, trains, and even planes all go somewhere to slowly decay. A transport cemetery is a place where machine dies. The sun is incinerating, the rains wash over the hulls, which are slowly eaten away by rust. The places are sad, gloomy, and often mystical. Train Cemetery, Bolivia. High in the Andes Mountains in the southwestern Bolivia lies the Uyuni Salt Flats, the world's largest dried-up salt lake. In 1888, with the development of the coal mining industry, the construction of a large railway network had to be started, which was completed in 1892. But already in 1940s, coal reserves were depleted and the crisis began. Train turned out to be unnecessary to anyone, and now there are rusty locomotives standing in the hot sun, many of which were made in Great Britain a century ago. There are no fences, no security. People gradually stole everything that could be useful in the household. Although there are plans to turn the cemetery into a museum, the trains are still left to the mercy of the local population and nature. Forest Car Cemetery, Chatillon, Belgium. More recently, deep in the forest near a small Belgian town, 4 car cemeteries were discovered, where more than 500 cars were covered with moss and rye. The question of the origin of the machines was unclear. The most popular version was that the first car appeared at the end of the World War II, when American soldiers could not send their transport home and left it in the forest, and only then other vehicles were added to them over the decades. Most of the cars are produced in 50s and 60s, many of them are collector's items. The last cemetery was cleared in 2010, so only photographs remain for history. Car Cemetery, Oranjemund, Namibia. Oranjemund is a small town owned by Namdeb, a joint venture between the Namibian government and the De Beers cartel, located at the very mouth of the river. The orange area is rich in diamonds, and therefore the city appeared as a working village for miners. The city is guarded. Armed guards control its perimeter. Without permission, it will not even be possible to leave the airport. Anyone who dares to steal a diamond faces a 15-year prison sentence. But beyond that, Oranjemund is one of the world's largest excavation machinery cemeteries. If a vehicle has entered the territory of the mines, it will not leave there. Perhaps this is one way to combat diamond theft. Some rusted cars date back to the beginning of the last century. Among them, there are even tanks from the Second World War, which were used for digging the earth. Ship Graveyard, Nouadhibou, Mauritania. Nouadhibou, with a population of 100,000 inhabitants, is the second largest city in Mauritania, one of the poorest countries in the world. The city port, located in a wide bay, provides ships with excellent protection from the unpredictable ocean. In the 1980s, the local population began to abandon old ships in shallow waters. Little time has passed, and already ships from many countries found their lost refuge here. Local authorities, receiving bribes, only encouraged this trend. a variety of boards, from fishing trawls to naval cruisers, rust in the waters of the bay. One of the largest is United Malika, which ran aground in 2003. Despite the measures taken by the modern authorities, the number of buried ships continues to increase, although not as quickly as before. But there are positive aspects to the existence of a cemetery. It serves as a breeding ground for fish, so local fishermen often place nets between ships. In 2001, the government planned to use their vessel to create an artificial reef, but nothing has changed since then. Submarine Cemetery, Kola Peninsula. There is a cemetery of Soviet submarines in a small bay, Nezamennaya, in the far north of Russia. Since the 70s last century, military submarines, many of which are nuclear, were simply left in bay on the Kola Peninsula. The shipyard were busy with new orders and no one cared about the old boats. The cemetery is located in the border zone, so access to it is limited. It is only known that in the 90s some submarines were still scrapped. Train graveyard, Barrie, UK. In 1955, the nationalised British Railway announced its intention to dispose of the old rolling stock, which consisted of 650,000 cars and 16,000 steam locomotives. The company itself could not cope with such a volume, so it transferred part of the trains to private firms, among which was the Woodham Brothers in the city of Barrie in South Wales. The locomotives were separated from the cars, which the owner decided to dispose of first. Steam locomotives, which began to rust, soon became a popular attraction for tourists, so local enthusiasts decided to save rare specimens from destruction, which turned out to be 213 pieces, and they still work. Motorcycle Cemetery, New York, USA. Not far from the Erie Canal is an old warehouse famous among motorcycle enthusiasts. It once belonged to a man named Cole, who had a motorcycle business. To store the goods, he had to buy a barn. After his death, the new owner started selling motorcycle parts, but things were not going well. The barn was getting old, and the owner did not have money for repairs. As a result, the local authorities seized the property. Photos of motorcycle cemetery appeared on the internet in April 2010, sparkling interest among motorcyclists who rushed to see the contents of the warehouse. Only by November, all transport was removed and most of it was disposed of. Air Force Base, Falkingham. Falkingham Air Force Base in Lincolnshire opened in 1940 as a mock airfield filled with mock aircraft and personnel. At the beginning of 1944, it was transferred to the control of the United States, and in 1947 it was closed for the first time. After that, Thor ballistic missiles were stored at the base. In the 1963, it was closed again, and the land was given for agriculture purpose. Their area is now owned by Nelson M. Green and Sons Ltd, which stores hundreds of old vehicles here for parts. You can find almost any type of vehicles: crawler bulldozer, cranes, tractors, fuel trucks, and even military equipment from the Second World War. Radioactive burial ground, Chernobyl, Ukraine. After the Chernobyl disaster, not only people suffered, but also the equipment used in fight against fires and during subsequent decontamination operations. Most of the cars were pulled into one place near the village of Rasoha. Despite danger emitted literally and figuratively by technology, the local population periodically tries to go to the burial ground for scrap metal. There was even an attempt to use the Mi-8 helicopter as a cafe building. Air Force Base, Arizona. The official name of the Air Force Base is Davis, Montana. The size of the territory corresponds to the area of 1,430 football fields, which houses 4,200 aircraft worth $35 billion. It is the largest military aviation cemetery in the world and is divided into 4 categories. The first category includes preserved equipment, which can be lifted into the sky if necessary. The second category includes aircraft suitable only for spare parts. The third category includes those subject to repair, and the fourth category includes museum exhibits. It is a pity to realize that sooner or later all equipment will become outdated and retire, even if they are the best representatives of their class. Don't forget to subscribe and like it. Thanks for sharing, and bye-bye.